It's never easy to receive difficult news about your health. What makes it even harder is when you feel pressured into entering a treatment plan that you don't know if you're on board with. Hey friends, I'm Sarah, your host of What's on Your Plate podcast. And I'm here again sharing the mic with Barbara Walsh, a board certified master health coach. Today is a great day to remind ourselves that our wellness is something we hold power over. We're talking about doing this differently. We're listening to our intuitions instead of the disconnected recommendations of those not even living in our bodies. Now more than ever, it's time to pay attention to how we feel, what keeps us struggling, our immunity, and how we can enhance the path to wellness. Let's jump in. So I am here with Barbara Walsh today, board certified master health coach. She has a personal story of empowerment that came as a result of a very scary diagnosis. And we're listening and talking today about how she listened to her intuition, pushed past the pressures of Western medicine, and really took her health back in a very holistic way. I'm just so excited and pumped for this conversation. I feel like everybody needs to hear it.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when you shared your story with me recently, after we got off that call, there was just so many things that came to mind to me. Um, People in my life who have had similar diagnosis that you had and the course they took instead of exploring something different. And it always just leaves you kind of wondering, what if they had chosen something else for themselves? You know, the people I refer to, my mom in particular, passed away from a similar diagnosis.
Oh,
And
sorry.
it just leaves me wondering, what if we had done something different? But
Yeah.
who's to say? But Barbara, I would love to just have you kind of start. Tell us our listeners what we're talking about today.
Okay. Well, let's see. It was 8 years ago. I went for, my annual checkup and mammogram, and that's when and that day, it never occurred to me that when I went in, that it would be any different than any other time. I figured when I went in, I'd come out, I'd go home, whatever. And that day was really different because that was the day that they said, "Hey, we see something suspicious." They sent me for biopsies. And then after that, they came back and they said, "We're sorry to tell you this, but you have breast cancer." And it was super shocking because, well, it would be super shocking anyway. It's terrifying, honestly. I don't want to downplay it. It's really, really the most terrifying thing that will ever happen, I think, in anyone's life. Um, and I was shocked because I didn't have that family history of breast cancer, which is defined as, a first generation female relative who has had breast cancer prior or has it, So that would be like my mom. I have two sisters, would have been one of them, would have been, if I had a daughter, it would be my daughter. You know what I mean? Those would have been the connections. So I didn't have that. And so probably naive. I thought to myself, how great is my risk really? I think my risk is not that great. I don't have that quote unquote genetic thing going on. And I was always very responsible, did all the things, did the self checks, went to the doctor, got everything, screening, you name it. And in my mind, all this time I was thinking to myself, I'm doing what I need to do for prevention. I'm being responsible with my health, right? But what I didn't realize back then is that doing all that, while it's good, it really has nothing to do with whether or not you're preventing breast cancer or any cancer in your life. All it's doing is diagnosing you to tell you whether or not you have it, right? So those things combined, I was shocked. And so I was terrified because, everything, I had a picture in my life, in my mind, what my life was going to be. And it did not include cancer. It did not include going into the hospital. It did not include infusions. It didn't include any of that. And so as my husband and I went, to visit our um, oncologist, and she was like a top breast surgeon in my area, and she diagnosed me, and then she gave me the protocol, which is going to be given to every single person who's diagnosed with any kind of cancer. It's always going to be surgery. It's always going to be radiation. It's always going to be chemo. And in my case, I had an estrogen positive breast cancer. So I was adding on to that, protocol would have been a lifetime of tamoxifen, which is an estrogen blocker that, I would have had to stay on for the rest of my life to theoretically prevent, recurrence. So as I thought about those things, I thought number one, pretty much everything, and I didn't know it about tamoxifen until later, but pretty much everything they were offering me, with the exception of surgery, is known to cause other cancers. So like, you know, radiation causes cancer. I mean, even if you go to the dentist, you want to take a little picture of your gum, they load you up with the big metal vest, and then tech runs out of the room, for fear of their life to hit a button for like 2 seconds. But this would have been much more, invasive than that because it would have been covering, really large area of my body. So we know that causes cancer. On top of that, radiation, especially in breasts, and I had it in the left breast, is known to cause heart damage. So then you have another complication potentially from this treatment. And chemotherapy, it's well documented in scientific literature. You can look it up. Your listeners can look it up. Chemotherapy causes cancer. It just is known to be a carcinogen. So, as I thought about these things, my husband asked the doctor, well, if my wife does this treatment that you're recommending, will she be cured? And the doctor gave me a really surprising and dissatisfying answer, because what she said to me was, well, there's no guarantees. We'll consider your treatment to be a success if there's no recurrence within 5 years. And so as I thought about that, I thought, wow, 5 years, that's not a very long time. And then I thought to myself, if by chance I did only have 5 years to live, I really, for me personally, I did not want to spend it sick. I didn't want to spend it sick. I didn't want to spend it going in and out of the hospitals. And call me vain, I did not want to spend it bald with my head in the toilet. I just didn't want that. I figured if I was going to die in 5 years, I just want to live and, maybe make my life the best thing it could be for that last 5 years, right? I know it sounds morbid, but these are the things that go through your mind when you're there. And you know what? There's a lot of pressure in that situation, in that moment, because I was facing pressure from my doctor. She wanted me in surgery, and she wanted me. I had literally just come out of the biopsy, and I had trauma, tissue trauma from that. I had a lot of bruising and tissue trauma, and I was in pain, and my arm was in pain and stuff like that. And she literally wanted me in surgery the next day. And then right after that, she wanted me to schedule my battery of, radiation and chemo. And that probably would have been about a year's worth of treatments based on what she was, prescribing for me. And so there's so much pressure, and and you're terrified. So like there's fear. I hate to say this. Maybe this isn't true for everybody, but I kind of think it is. My doctor actually, impressed a lot of fear on me as well, because she was really impressing on me. If you don't do this treatment, you're going to get sicker. You're going to die. You have to get into treatment. You have to get into treatment. And so it's like you're in a vice grip in that moment, because it's like, first, you're scared. Second, you can't process what they've told you. Third, you can't believe you're even in that room. And then you have all this pressure to make a life-altering decision in that moment when you're not thinking clearly, honestly. And call me crazy, but I don't know any decision that's ever made that's based in fear that turns out well, because you're not really able to weigh what it is that you're choosing at that moment. So, we decided to leave, and my husband and I are Christians, and prayer is a big part of my life. And so I really wanted time to process what was happening to me. I wanted to find some semblance of peace in the situation because I was so scared. And so, I spent a lot of time in prayer, and I honestly believe that God answered my prayers. Call me crazy, but I believe he did, because, he led me on this really amazing path. Like I felt led to do research. And I am not a person with a medical background. I'm not a scientist. I have no background in research whatsoever. So I found myself doing this research and I found out some pretty incredible stuff. I found out that, number one, I found out that tamoxifen, which they were going to add to my regimen, is known to cause uterine cancer. So I thought to myself, well, add that to the carcinogen of the radiation and the chemo, and then I have this other one that I'm going to be introducing to my body the whole time. And then I started thinking about the whole 5-year thing. And I was thinking 5 years, if I do this treatment, right? Because I was weighing my options. And actually, while I was weighing my options, I was waiting to get into like the number one cancer mecca in my area. And I couldn't get in, which actually turned out to be a blessing because it gave me like the grace of some time. So as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking, well, if I do these treatments, I do, I do treatments that are known to cause cancers and I introduce them into my body, it would only stand to reason, logically speaking, cause and effect, that if I continue to expose myself, internally to carcinogenic properties and chemicals, that why wouldn't a cancer show up again? Why wouldn't I get a cancer in another part of my body? And honestly, if we're being honest with ourselves, we hear it all the time, especially now, because I mean, like everybody, every time you turn around, I mean, sadly, we've all been touched by cancer in some way, right? Like you yourself, I know people, that have been diagnosed and, you know, have not fared as well. And now you're hearing it like with a lot of celebrities being diagnosed. I think I just saw this thing like James Vanderbeek, who was on Dawson's Creek. He's like 40 years old. He was diagnosed with a stage 4 colon cancer. I mean, colon cancer is like, I'm getting off track, but colon cancer is like an old person's disease, theoretically, right? So it's like, I started thinking to myself, if I do that, I'm setting myself up for a future cancer. I had no doubt in my mind about that. So as I was thinking about the whole 5-year thing, I started researching cancer and I found out something incredible, which maybe you know, or maybe your listeners don't know, but did you know that it can take most cancers, and breast cancers included, not all of them, but most, up to 10 years to develop in the body before they can be detected on a scan? So what that means is that you could be, happily living your life, getting your mammograms every year, and that thing is not going to pick it up because it's just too small and it's developing in your body. So that blew me away, number one, because then I started weighing that, the 5-year treatment plan where I could possibly get better or I could end up with another cancer down the road, or 10 years, which is probably what was happening to me all along, that in a 10-year period prior to the diagnosis, something was going on in my body. I just didn't know, right? And I was still getting the mammograms and they were telling me, you're good. So, I mean, that's kind of a weird thing to wrap your head around when you think about that. So as I was thinking about that, I thought, okay, well, why would it be developing my body over this time? And that's when I learned about what the key really to healing from cancer, at least for me, and probably a lot of other people out there, but the key to healing from cancer or any other disease really is the power of your immune system. So I was clearly compromised. I mean, immune compromised. That's a big buzz term that we've heard since 2020. Now everybody knows immune compromised, right? I was immune compromised, you know, 15, 20 years ago, right? And I had no idea that I was. But weirdly, my body was sending me signals that I was immune compromised, but I had no idea what it meant. And what does that look like when you're immune compromised? It looks like, you catch colds all the time. And like I have a kid, and every time he went to school in the fall or the spring, it was like whatever was there in that hotbed of bacteria classroom that he was in, he would bring it home and I would get it. So I was sick all the time. If I wasn't sick all the time, I had sinus headaches all the time. If I didn't have sinus headaches all the time, I had indigestion, I had digestive problems, I had, sorry people, TMI, I had constipation, I had diarrhea, I had UTIs all the time, chronic UTIs, I had rashes, I had all this stuff going on. And because I was a compliant patient, whenever this would happen, I'd run right to the doctor. I was like, hey, you got to help me out. I got to get relief from whatever this is going on in my body. And of course, they would check me out. They do all the tests and whatever. And they would say, I don't know, we don't see anything really problematic. There's nothing big going on here. And then they'd write me a prescription to give me relief from my symptoms, which was typically antibiotics or something like that. And when I couldn't get to the doctor, like I'd come home and I'd do the course of the antibiotics, they tell you whatever, 5 days, 7 days, whatever. I'd do that. I'd be good for about a week and bam, something would flare up again. It was like I was living in this cycle of being sick all the time. And weirdly, I got used to it. I got
Mm.
complacent about it. It was like I started thinking to myself, you know what? You are getting a little older. You're in your 40s, you're getting older, and that's what happens. The body starts changing and it starts breaking down. And, maybe that's just how it is. And so I started to come into like an acceptance of it. It's kind of like I heard this today on this thing online on a social thing about, how frogs, you could put them in a pot of water and you could slowly turn up the heat and they won't even realize it. And the next thing you know, you're boiling the frog. And I was that frog. And so and then weirdly on the other side of it, if I couldn't get to the doctor and I couldn't get a prescription, I would run to the pharmacy and get something. It's millions of over the counter meds out there. And as I was doing this in my mind, I'm starting thinking, well, look at all these medications. There's something for everybody. Everybody's got something. Everybody I talked to had something. It must just be normal. But it's not normal. And what it really was that my immune system was telling me, hey, we have a problem going on in here, but I didn't know it. It was like red flags, check engine light everywhere you go. And the thing is, like with all of these symptoms I was experiencing, and I think this might be true for other people out there, like how often if you get a sinus headache, how would you really tie that to a digestive issue? Would you think they're associated? Probably not. One's in your head, one's in your gut. It doesn't seem like they're connected, right? Or, if you get a rash, do you think that's associated with a UTI? Probably not. But the truth is, all of those things are connected because they're all rooted in our immune system. And so, because that was going on in my life, my body was telling me that there was a problem going on, but I didn't know enough to recognize it. And then what ended up happening was, I was kind of unknowingly creating the perfect storm in my body where cancer could grow and thrive. And so as I learned this, it totally blew me away. I was like, oh my God, I did this kind of to myself. And part of the reason why I say that is because a lot of it had to do with the fact that I'm a regular person like everybody else. I wasn't raised, like in a super healthy, environment as far as food is concerned. We just ate what we ate, tasted good. We ate snack foods, we ate snack cakes, we ate chips out of the bag, we drank soda, we did all of those regular American things that we all do. I ate fast food. I mean, like, people here, I'm a health coach, and I got to tell you, I, when I look back where I was the furthest thing from a healthy anything. I was really the poster child for God help me, you know what I mean? But I didn't know it, and I was kind of dragging myself through life. I was exhausted all the time. I was sick all the time. I was stressed all the time. All these things work together and they compromise your immunity and set you up for, you know, something not so great to brew in your body and then manifest into something that you really don't want. So that's what happened. And so then I started thinking to myself, well, how the heck do I address my immune system if that's the key? And thinking about the immune system too, I mean, that's a big component because when you do undergo treatments like chemotherapy, they totally eradicate your immune system. They just devastate you. So the thing that you really need to get better is kind of stripped from you through that process, which makes the healing much more difficult and also sets you up for, other illnesses down the road. So I started learning more and more, and I discovered that, the key really has to do with how we support our immune system. And a big part of that is food, you know? And so I thought to myself, wow, I talked to my husband about it, and I said to him, I'm finding all this stuff out. Oh, and incidentally, I met this woman along the way, which I think was another kind of godsend for me. She had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer 20 years prior to my diagnosis, and she was still alive and she was still thriving. She was actually a motivational speaker. She goes around and she actually lived in my area. And so I talked with her, and that was a game changer because it's like, you know, I was looking for alternatives. I didn't, I wasn't even sure there would be any. And I had heard, in theory about people doing things holistically, even though I didn't really subscribe to that thought process prior to my experience. And meeting somebody who had done that really was a game changer. And she was, and like, even people I know who have had cancer have friends, family members who have had cancer and, unfortunately maybe didn't make it. I had never met anyone who lived 20 years after a diagnosis and was thriving. I just never met anyone like that. And so she told me her story and how she went a completely holistic route before there was the internet, before we could search stuff out. She just, went out on a limb and she did this. And she ended up turning her situation completely around. And so she said something to me which was so insightful. She said, if you're even thinking about doing something naturally, let me tell you a couple things. Number one, you probably have more time than you feel like you have sitting in that doctor's office. You have a little more time to think about it and weigh it out. And number two, if it doesn't work for you and you try it, you can always go back. They'll always give you radiation, they'll always give you surgery, they'll always give you chemo, they'll always write you a script for tamoxifen. That'll never be a no. And I thought to myself, wow, what a great plan B. Because, obviously, if I had done nothing in the, after this diagnosis, and I was thinking back to the fact that it took 10 years for it to develop, it probably would have been another 10 years before it progressed to the next stage. So, you know, and then if I did the treatment, it would have been 5 years of gruelingness. And then who knows what would be on the other side of that. Right. And so I thought to myself, well, this is great. It's a plan B. So if I try this and it doesn't work, I'll just go back to treatment, right? That's an option. The door's never closed. And so as I weighed all this out, it just made so much more sense to me to try to nourish my body to get better, so it could really heal rather than hoping if I take poisonous treatments that maybe I'll get well if I survive the treatment at all. It just made sense. And not only that, but I had that peace. I mentioned earlier that I was really looking for that. And that decision just gave me so much peace. And so I talked to my husband and he was very supportive and he was like, if that was me, I'd be the first one in line for that natural stuff. And so I was thankful that I had that. I had that in my life.
Mhm.
And so that's what I did. I went all in, changed everything about the way I ate, the way I managed my stress, the way I um, decided to exercise when I didn't want to exercise. Like I just changed everything about my life because for me it was a life or death decision. It was like a wake up call. I was like, all right, we've got to do something. And the other part of the motivator was that I thought, well, if I do this, it's going to involve eating healthy stuff and taking a lot of things out of my diet that I'm used to that are probably not serving my body in any way because they have, totally devoid of any nutrient content. And I thought if nothing less, I'll at least get healthier. So if and when I go into treatment, my body will be strong enough to maybe withstand it. And then I thought to myself, the other side of it is, well, even I try this and it doesn't work, it's not like I'm taking some weird experimental drug that there's no track record or testing, for, and we don't know what the side effects of it are going to be. It's probably never going to hurt me if I eat more broccoli. So let's go. So that was it. And so along with that, I also did use some things, like from Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, things that have been around like for eons, herbal stuff that, prior to this, I would have thought was the craziest thing on earth, but they actually turned out to be really powerful, components. and have powerful properties that heal. And so I went back for testing because the docs wanted to see me. It was like 6 months after I had gone through this whole change. And at that time, they tested me again, and then they couldn't find the cancer anymore in my breast. And they gave me NED, which is no evidence of disease. And that's what every cancer patient wants to hear, because what that means is that you're good, clean slate. Yeah. So that's more than a nutshell, but that's the story.
Wow, Barbara, that is an inspiring story for sure. There's so much that comes up for me when you're sharing all of that. One of the things that I feel like a lot of people don't realize, I'm not sure I would realize it in the moment, especially without having conversations like these, is that you do have a choice. You don't have to do what they're saying is next, right? And I think we really get stuck in that. It's almost like somebody trying to sell you something, like a get it while it's hot type of mentality. It's like the discount or the deal that's going to go away if you don't grab it now type of feeling, which is always a red flag, right?
Oh
Anytime you
gosh.
have to make an immediate decision or somebody's pressuring you or pushing you into making a choice or saying yes,
Yeah.
whether it's like, buying a timeshare or signing up for a membership or making a decision about your health,
Yeah.
like anytime somebody is like, it's now or never, like
Yeah.
instantly, like red flag, walk away, I feel
So
like.
true. So true. And you know what's interesting that you say that, because I think a big part of it, especially, for my generation, I'm older than you are, but we were always raised, that you respect the doctor.
Yep.
They're well-educated, people. They've gone through a gazillion years of school. They should know. They know what's best for you. And I'm not saying that they are not well-educated and not good at what they do, but really ultimately, my husband, I talked to my husband about that, and this was something that he said that also wasn't, really kind of eye-opening. He said, you know what? When you go, whatever treatment you choose, the doctor, no matter how nice and whatever his bedside manner is, he's not going to be there when you go through that treatment. It's all you. You're the one. You're
Mm-hmm.
the one who has to endure whatever it is. So you
Mm-hmm.
need to really, I guess, like you're saying, you need to know that. Like you need to weigh that in your mind. And because it's like, um, if you're raised like I was, where you respect the doctor, it's, going against that grain is a tough, tough thing to do,
Yeah.
because you feel like you're being disrespectful or you're being, I don't know, arrogant in some way. But the other side of
Mm-hmm.
it is it's not encouraged, unfortunately. Like at least it wasn't for me. When I was trying to inquire of my doctor, I wasn't really, I was kind of shut down in those areas. I was not really, it wasn't entertained that we
Mm-hmm.
could talk about anything else, which I think is not so good. Because I think if it's all about your health, I think you have the right to know, because you're the one who lives in that body, don't you think? At least I think so.
100%. And I think that most people are driven by fear. Like you talked about earlier, there's so much emphasis on doing what the doctor has told you is best, especially in older generations. I feel like the 20 somethings are getting a little bit farther removed from that type of mentality because they are seeing that, you know, and again, not to discredit anybody who has immerse themselves in the medical field, or any type of healing practice or anything like that, but it isn't the only way, right?
I agree.
So we're always fed that this is what you do in this instance type of situation, forgetting about all of the herbal remedies and the naturopath and the holistic approach to doing things that are widely forgotten,
Yeah.
and I feel like are only recently gaining traction again because people are discovering that things like chemotherapy do cause additional cancers and radiation is a known carcinogen, and all of these things that we have been told over the years is what we need to do are the things that might be actually hindering us moving forward.
Oh, so true. So true. And, weirdly, you know, it's not only that, but it also has to do, I think, with, our foods. I think the foods, I know this is a big hot topic right now because, of things that are going on politically that, most people are so unaware that what's in most food that people eat, there's stuff in there that's carcinogenic too. But it's kind of sad that it's even allowed in our foods. Like if you many additives that are in foods here are that are acceptable here in the United States. In Europe, they're banned. You can't put them in the foods there. Or if you do, you have to put like black box warnings on your food saying, hey, there's something in here that could, cause cancer in your body. But
Mhm.
here it's just so it's like really pervasive because it's in the food and it's like everybody's just used to that and we kind of been lulled to sleep by it in a weird way. And then
Mhm.
what's happening is we're actually contributing to our own, health consequences from the inside out without knowing it. And I was one of those people for sure. So I don't fault people for that. I'm just saying it's there. And I think that there's not enough, there hasn't been enough awareness about it. I'm hoping that more will come out, now, like you're saying, because even like younger generation, they're becoming more aware of things around them. They're becoming more aware of their autonomy. And I think when it comes to our health, that's something that really we shouldn't relinquish that. I think I think it's important not to do that. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And, you know, the idea that you didn't always have this knowledge. I think that is like true for everybody that has elevated themselves into a higher knowing, right? Or has healed themselves or has made some significant change to be better. I too grew up very much on Mountain Dew, Burger King, grabbing a donut in the morning. And, I don't say those things to pass judgment on people that are still doing that, but evolving to the point where I am now to be fully plant-based,
Hmm.
it wasn't always that way, right? I
Yeah.
mean, when you know better, you do better.
True.
And that's just the nature of life. Just like having a knowing that you do now about what you would and wouldn't do should you have a diagnosis like cancer,
Oh
right?
yeah.
But it's hard, it is hard because that ingraining, that programming of what we've always been told what we should do, whether it's
Hmm.
listening to the doctor, whether it's taking the chemo or the drugs to cure whatever it is, cancer or anything else, when more often than not, if we just take the time to pause and reassess what we're doing every day, what our habits are, what we're literally feeding ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Um, and diet in regards to just not just food, not just physically what's on our plates, but also the energy we're in, also how we spend our time. Is it sedentary? Is it movement based?
Hmm.
The way that we show up for our emotional health, right? All of those things contribute to that lower immunity as well.
Totally. Absolutely do. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. It's that's the whole thing. It's kind of like, what I was saying before about, how everything inside your body's connected and how like there's a domino effect that goes on. Like it could be a domino effect for, negative health consequences, but it could be a domino effect for, really positive changes in your body that could totally turn the state of your health around. I mean, I- I'm living proof that that is
Hmm.
true, you know? And so I think that there's a misconception out there that the things that we do are not connected to each other and don't impact one another, and that the choices that we make are not really that important. I mean, I was like that, honestly. I mean, like you were
Yeah.
saying how, you were raised on soda and sugary donuts and stuff like that. Me
Yeah.
too. I mean, I was like, the first one in the drive-through, is it fried, dipped in
Hmm.
chocolate? And, does it come with like a 20 ounce? I was right in line. I mean, I was the girl who, I lived on venti cappuccinos and, you know, ate peanut M&Ms for protein when I was starving myself to lose weight that I gained after I went through the drive-through, you know, I
Yeah.
was that person. But like it never occurred to me all the time. I know it sounds so silly, but it never occurred to me all the time that all of those choices I was making were having an impact on my body in some way, shape, or form. And then I still never put that together to the even up to the stage where I was in that 10-year period where all the stuff was going haywire in my body, you know. I started thinking, "Oh my gosh, it must just be perimenopause. That's it," you know? But not so much.
Right. That's so interesting that you say that too, because my age is absolutely entering that stage, right? And there's been a lot of conversations in my world lately about perimenopause. And it's interesting to think about. That's not really just a symptom most of the time, right? Of a stage of life you're entering. Pay closer attention. Why are you feeling that way? Why is your body reacting? It's easy to blame your symptoms on something that seems out of your control.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
When in reality, if you stop doing something long enough to know how it feels to take it away, right? So, like, if you are somebody that eats fast food every day, and
Mhm.
then you stop eating fast food for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then paying attention to how your body feels when you remove something that is not for the health of your body,
Sure.
it's only in those moments, I feel like, when you're intentionally paying attention, that you start having those aha moments of like, "Oh, I guess that was causing me to feel bloated," or, "Oh, I guess that really was contributing to my migraines or acid reflux," or all these things that are like almost like, I don't want to say made up conditions because they are real, but they are not naturally occurring in our bodies so much as they are a product and a symptom of what we do to our bodies that is not for us.
Yeah. Very true. Super true. Yeah, that's so true. I think that's an interesting point that you made that you bring up there because it's like there it almost seems like, when stuff like that happens, it's external to us, and it just happens to us. It's like, wow, this just happened to me and I don't even know how it happened, but it is something that's going on internally and we're feeding that in some way, shape, or form, whether it's with our diet, whether it's our lack of sleep, whether it's we choose or not choose to exercise, whether it's I hate to say the E word because it's like a four-letter word for most people, myself included, it always was, whether or not we choose to, you know, not live a stressed out life. All of those things are not, we're it's especially as women, it's is a big deal because it's like, we're so busy. Women are, I mean, men are busy too, but women are much busier than men because our lives are much more multifaceted, I think. Like most of us are, well, we're grown women, most of us work, so we have jobs, we have careers, we have aspirations. Some of us are married, we have a husband, we have family. Some of us have children, so we're moms. So, like we do so many things. We have like we have like the biggest hat rack in the world. We're constantly changing our hat into whatever thing that we're doing. And so what ends up happening is like we just kind of get tossed back and forth by this stuff. And then we're not paying and we don't feel like we have time to pay attention to those things, because we're so busy with distractions of everyday life. And I'm not saying those are not important, but we're distracted from that. And most women, sad but true, and I know this to be true for myself and from women that I work with in my health coaching practice, we are, when it comes to our own self-care, that is like the most selfish sounding, dirty word that anyone could bring up. It's like, self-care. Oh my God, I don't have time for self-care. What is that? Or if they do, they feel guilty about it. And so
Yeah.
that they don't want to engage in that. But the real truth of the matter is that if we don't take that time to raise our awareness, like you're saying, about what we're eating, what we're doing, how is it making you feel? I mean, think about it. I mean, I know myself. I mean, all those years in the drive-through, I felt crappy. all the time. I felt tired. I felt sluggish. I would be starving because I was either starving myself trying to lose weight. And then I would go and I'd be like, oh my God, I ate something where my blood sugar was so low, I just couldn't control myself, you know? And then I would eat like crazy and then I would gain weight and it became this vicious cycle, you know? And so, um, we need to get the awareness of like when, like you're saying, when we eat something, how do you feel about how I know it sounds weird, like it sounds too woo, how do you feel about it? But really, how does your body feel? Do you
Hmm.
feel better when you eat that Big Mac? Or do you feel better when you eat something that's fresher? You know, these are the shifts that we have to make. And it's really important because the truth of the matter is if we don't take care of ourselves, I know it sounds cliche, but nobody will. And if
Right.
we don't take care of ourselves, what's going to happen to all the people around us that are depending on us? Not to add pressure to you, but it's the truth. Like people always say
Sure.
that, I got to put my kid first. I got to put my husband first. I got to put this first. Oh, I got to put my job first. But, what happens when you become depleted? What happens to all those other aspects and avenues in your life that are dependent on you? So I think if you
Hmm.
think about it in that aspect, the idea of self-care becomes probably more important. It becomes less of like putting yourself as the very last thing on the bottom of your list that you absolutely never get to. And I think that that's a really it's an important shift to make. And I think it's important to allow ourselves to make it because, as women, we try to always put other people ahead of ourselves most of the time, you know?
Yeah, I would argue just about 100% of the time, right?
Yeah.
And I say that for sure from a place of knowing and experience with that.
Mhm.
Um, Something you said a few minutes ago about, feeling. How do you feel after you do something? And saying that that sounds a little bit woo woo. Um, I wholeheartedly feel as though acknowledging our emotions, acknowledging how our body responds, acknowledging just what you feel like before and after doing something is so downplayed. And it's even something that has been discouraged over the years, right? In terms of like, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares how you feel. Just ignore, that feeling of whatever, insert undesirable thing, right? And just keep pushing forward. It doesn't matter how you feel
Yeah.
about it. All of these messages that we've been given over the course of our life. So to ask somebody to stop and pause and think about how they feel, I think some people, and say that with myself in mind, I'm talking about myself with those some people, they don't even sometimes know how to do that in certain
Oh, yeah.
situations, right? Like
Yeah.
even just understanding what you're supposed to be looking for in terms of what feeling, feel what you feel. You hear that a lot these days. You're allowed to feel what you feel. But I think it's been so blurred over the years, and it's true too for just what we choose to eat. Um, what energy we find ourselves in, or how you feel after making a seemingly better choice than one that is less than. And really being able to sit with that, I think is something, it's like going way back to the beginning, starting from scratch and understanding that you might have to learn how to feel the feels. It might not be something that is just easy for you to gain a knowing about.
Yeah. What's interesting what you're saying about that too is I know from my experience, it never occurred to me that when I changed what I ate, that I would feel any different. It just
Mhm.
never really occurred to me. I mean, when I made my shift, I mean, I totally went, a 180 from where I had been, from all of the fast processed foods that I was used to eating, to eating really fresh food, lots of fruits and vegetables and things like that. And it just never really occurred to me that that was going to change the way I felt. But as I started doing it, first of all, it didn't sound that exciting to me, to be honest with you. I thought it was going to be like this boring, flavorless experience, and I thought to myself, well, I got to do it, because it's either this or chemo. So, okay, we'll just go with this. But it turned out to be so much better than I imagined it being. I know that sounds silly, but it's true. It's like I started
Mhm.
eating that fresh food and I started doing a lot of juicing and stuff like that. And you know what happened? Like my body started responding, which
Mhm.
I never imagined that happening. You know, it literally started responding and I started to feel different. And I started to look different. Like when I was diagnosed, I was just entered menopause, and I was one of those lucky ladies that tacks on that, freshman 15. But for me, it was, I don't know, freshman 30. It was a lot of weight that I picked up when I hit menopause. And that's not uncommon for women, honestly. And again, it was one of those things that it was just like, oh, well, you're in menopause now and that's what it's going to be. And you're just going to have to feel good about yourself the way you are. And so what if you have to go up another 2 dress sizes? It's fine. Your family loves you, blah, blah, blah. Not that that's bad, but I'm just saying these were the thoughts that went on in my
Mhm.
head. And I just thought to myself, well, that's how it's going to be because I'm older now and I'm in a menopause. But interestingly, as I made all these shifts and I started changing my diet, that 30 pounds that I had gained inside of like 2 years came off like that, and I wasn't even trying. And that was like a major bonus as someone who knows intimately the dieting roller coaster. I'm that girl. And that was amazing. But more than that, like I started to look better, not just because I lost weight, but like my skin looked better, my eyes looked better. I felt better. I had energy that I forgot I could have. I had come to a point where it's just like I was just dragging all the time and energy, what's that? I started sleeping better. Um, I just started feeling better, looking better. And, it was directly correlated to the change because I had literally changed everything. And, people around me started noticing, like, I'll be honest, I wasn't brave. I didn't go out and say, hey, guess what? I was diagnosed with breast cancer and I'm going to do this really weird thing. I didn't tell anybody. But
Yeah.
people who knew me saw a big change in me. They're like, oh my gosh, you look great. What are you doing? What are you doing? And I said, I started getting into food and I'm detoxing my body and I'm changing the way I'm eating. And they all looked at me like a little sideways, but they couldn't deny that they saw something different in me. And
Mhm.
I felt something different in me. And I knew that something good was happening in my body. Interestingly, when I went back at that 6-month mark for that extra testing, when they did all my labs were perfect. And they had never been like that before. Like prior to, they were starting to tell me, oh, you have to be careful about your cholesterol. You have to watch this, you have to watch that, and stuff like that. You have to watch your blood sugar, blah, blah, blah. Well, of course, I had to watch my blood sugar. That's all I was eating was sugar. No wonder cancer grew in my body because cancer loves to eat sugar. And that's what I was feeding it.
Mhm.
And so everything, had improved dramatically in a very short period of time. I felt it and I knew it was doing something. And when I say that, I want to encourage people that if you think you want to make a different choice or make a change, it's worth it because you're going to feel it really quickly because that's how quick, at least the body can respond so quickly when you feed it what it needs because it's looking
Mhm.
for those nutrients. It's starving for them. I mean, I think they say that like our country is like, the most well-fed, malnourished nation in the world. That's our nation of people, today, which is sad, but it's true. And had I known all these years ago, like way back when, in the 10-year period, I am confident had I made those changes back then, I probably could have avoided cancer in the first place because I would have been addressing it at the time it was developing before it could have been detected, right? So, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it really makes a lot of sense. And I'm sorry that the diagnosis had to come in order for you to make this life change. But Barbara, it is really inspiring that you just took responsibility for yourself and went absolutely against the grain and accomplish something amazing, to go back and not have any cancer be found. That's the success story that is your purpose now from that pain, and the way
Totally.
that you're sharing it with everybody. And I want to say something, I don't want it to get missed by our listeners. Kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier on. Most of the time, a cancer diagnosis has nothing to do with hereditary
Yeah.
issues, right? So
It's such
many
a
of us,
small amount. It's
yeah,
such,
so
I
many of
think
us
it's like less
think,
than 10%. It's so small.
yeah, so many of us think that we can dismiss being at risk for things, whether it's breast cancer or colon cancer or heart disease, diabetes, any of those things that, we've been told to believe that are family traits or like things that are going to be a generational problem, right? They don't have to be,
True.
but you have to
Absolutely.
be willing to make the changes. You can't keep on with the fast food line in every generation type of living if you want to break those patterns.
So true. It's so true. You're right. It's such a small amount of the population of people who diagnosed with cancer have a quote unquote genetic component or predisposition. And actually, the World Health Organization categorizes pretty much all cancer as lifestyle disease. Same thing with diabetes, honestly. Well, not type 1. Type 1's genetic, but type 2 diabetes, it's considered a lifestyle disease, you
Mhm.
know? And so what does that mean? It means like, wow, what we do matters, the choices that we make actually make a difference, And so, and the other thing too is like, it is tough to take that responsibility because it's kind of like, in my case, I had to really own up to the fact that I had done something to contribute to the condition that I found myself in.
Mhm.
I didn't just end up there overnight. I wasn't just, kidnapped and thrown in a sack and end up in this room somewhere with beyond my control. We have a lot more control than we think we have. And I think that that's another really important message for people to know. Just like you have the autonomy, over your health, you actually have a lot of control as to what the outcome of your health is going to be. Because even if you did have a genetic mutation or a predisposition in your body, like let's say, quote unquote, the BRCA gene, that's a biggie with breast cancer, even if you do have that genetic predisposition, it's not a guarantee that cancer is going to be the outcome. And the reason why I say that is because there's this whole field of scientific research now called epigenetics. Some of you may have heard about that. And basically what they're researching now and what they are finding is that our genes are set up and they have little switches, on off switches, right? So you might be born with this genetic component and the switch is in the off position, which means it's not going to um, mutate and become a disease in your body, right? And we can affect whether the switches turn on or off with our food, with our diet. So even if you have that genetic component, it doesn't mean that you without control in your situation. Because if you feed your body the thing that keeps that switch turned in the off position, you can kind of be set free from that shadow of the fear of, oh my God, maybe one day I'm going to get this disease. You know what I mean? And
For sure.
it's definitely an emerging area of research that I think is really fascinating because I'm a control freak. I want to know, what can I do? What can I do to make it better? Just like every time I turn around and I see people around me that I love or my kid or whatever, it's like, they need something. What can I do to make it better? I want to do that, from what I've learned. I want to do that for my body, too, because we can. And I think that's really freeing. It's super empowering for women, especially even as we get older because the older we get and things shift and hormonally in our bodies, they just do. It doesn't mean that we have to get into a state where we're just complacent in our health or our lack of health and feeling like our our energy is non-existent or that we're only going to continue to live to feel worse and worse and worse and deteriorate as we get older. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It really doesn't.
And I love that you're spreading that message and that you're helping other people who are finding themselves in a similar situation that you've been in, and hopefully reaching people before they even get to that point, right? Tell us about what you're doing. How are you showing up for other women, other people, based on what you've been through?
Well, that was really the onus for me becoming a health coach because, like I said, as I was learning all this stuff and applying it and it was making a difference, I kept thinking to myself, why don't I know any of this? Like, why didn't anybody ever tell me any of this? And so I felt like I wish somebody had told me. So I feel like I wanna be able to at least tell people who wanna know that, like you were saying, that there are options and that there are things that you can do. But more importantly, that, like, you could do things before. Like, you don't have to wait till the doctor says, "Hey, guess what? You've got heart disease. Hey, guess what? You've got breast cancer." You don't have to wait. You could just do it now. And so what I do is, like, I work with women and mostly women. I work with some men too, who reach out to me who have different issues. Like some have been diagnosed with breast cancer, some have other chronic illnesses that they've been, living with, and they're looking to find some way to improve their existence without maybe adding another medication. And I've actually worked with some women who had been diagnosed with high blood pressure and heart disease, and after working together, the doctor told them they can go off their blood pressure meds. I mean, that's a huge win for them, honestly, and for anyone actually. So I work with people in that way. I have a podcast too, so I actually get out there and try to share what I can, share information about, you know, things that people can do that they can actually use in their lives to make a
Mhm.
difference. And I try to make things real for them and manageable so that they can actually work it into their life. Because let's face it, we might come, hear about something amazing, think, "Oh my God, I want to do that." But, and you might start out gung ho doing it, but can you sustain it? Because the truth is, no matter how cool it sounds, if we can't find a way to actually apply it to our lives and make it like something that we can tangibly do, that we
Mhm.
won't be able to sustain it and we won't ever realize the benefit of whatever that is. So that's a big part of what I do when I work with people is I help them to define, what it is they want to accomplish, and then help them to put it into real, manageable steps that they can work into their everyday lives, so that they can make the shift and that they can sustain it, so that they can get the results that they want. So that's what a lot of what I do. Yeah, and I speak too. So when I get a chance, I try to share. So yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I love everything that you're doing, and the small changes that people make every day are the big changes that eventually come, right?
Oh,
And
sure.
once you start seeing those tangible differences in your life, that's what fuels you to continue to stacking those habits.
Definitely.
So the fact that you are helping people start that journey and take back their health, empower themselves to know that they have choices when it comes to their health. Um, it's just amazing. I just love that there's people like you out there doing this work, and um, just know that if you're to our listeners, if you are facing something hard, if you're facing if family or friends or loved ones are facing something really hard, you don't have to make a knee jerk decision. You
Mhm.
can, even if you're told that now or never, start today, that should absolutely be your red flag to just pause, take a breath, take a day, take a week, whatever you need, and just make sure you have all the information to make a very informed decision, not a fear-based
Mhm.
one.
I totally agree. Yep. Yep. Game changer. Absolutely a game changer. You got to
Yeah.
take back your control, because when you're in those situations, it feels like your life's spinning out of control. And that's
Mhm.
how you can regain control of that situation and get a better outcome for yourself, for sure.
Barbara, I have just loved this very important conversation. I feel like there's so many layers, and I know that our listeners can find more conversations like this on your platform and in your spaces. Tell us where we can find you outside of this conversation today.
Okay, well, you can find me on Instagram. I'm over there. My handle is at good_nature_wellness, and that's the name of my business, Good Nature Wellness. I'm also on Facebook at Good Nature Wellness. And my show, guess what? It's called the Good Nature Wellness Podcast, and you can find that streams everywhere on my website, www.goodnaturewellness.com. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to offer a little resource to your listeners. Would that be all right?
I'd love that.
Okay, so it's actually a little thing that I put together. It's based on my experience with breast cancer, but it also shares some really practical things that people can do every day to actually lower their risk of breast cancer using things like natural foods and taking a holistic approach. And if you guys want to grab that, I'll be happy to give it to you. You can get it at my website, www.goodnaturewellness.com/5 things freebie. It's called 5 Things I Wish I Had Known Before I Was Diagnosed with Breast Cancer. So I hope that helps you guys.
That's going to help everybody, I feel like. Definitely, everybody that's listening, go over and grab that freebie from Barbara and just lean into everything that she's offering. This has been such a helpful conversation. I just thank you for taking the time to be here with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
In so many aspects of life, we're told not to trust ourselves. This is especially true for women who continue to be coerced into believing they don't know what's best for them, and they aren't allowed to be in control of their own bodies. Let's choose to be in resistance of that. Advocate and educate. Make choices based on truths, not fears, and lean into learning about how you can increase your immunity to avoid the dreaded diagnosis, or, if it does come, have the confidence to make decisions best for you, not just what is the standardized one-size-fits-all prescription. Connect with Barbara and let her help you on your journey towards elevating your health and mindset towards living well. All ways to stay connected are in the show notes. Please do take the time to rate, review, and share this podcast with a friend. It's the best way to keep the conversations coming. Until next time.